ready? You got me running.
I am Meredith Hirsh, and this is Working Healthcare. I just interviewed Dr. Nehad Soloman, and this is a must listen for anybody who is in the rheumatology world or who is a part of independent medicine. He's the Chief Medical Officer of Arizona Arthritis and Rheumatology Associates in Arizona, but not just Arizona, also in Texas. They are the largest by revenue independent rheumatology practices in the country. If you add on rheumatologists and APPs or mid-levels, whatever you want to call them, they are actually the largest by provider number. It's over 50. It's staggering, and they have a staff of over 200, and this is independent medicine. And we talk about a myriad of topics. We talk all about the sustainability of private practice and economies of scale. We talk about the rising cost of providing care to patients and what overhead and wages look like. We talk about utilizing APPs and mid-level physicians. We also talk about the hottest topic right now in the world of rheumatology, and it's about medically integrated dispensing pharmacy. Nehad and I co-presented at the Rheumatology Private Practice Alliance last year on what medically integrated dispensing was. And I get phone calls probably twice a week about MID, and I know that Dr. Solomon does as well. There is a squeeze in independent medicine, and discover a way that you can remain independent if that's what your calling is. Dr. Nehad Soloman, welcome to Working Healthcare.
Thank you. It's so great to be here.
I am very excited to have you on this podcast. We may be another Howard and Costello type redo at the ACR in the fall, but you and I were on a panel discussion at the Rheumatology Private Practice Alliance in the fall, and that's when I sort of grabbed you and started asking you a bunch of questions, and I said, this is a rheumatologist with a personality. I like him.
Well, thank you very much.
I think I liked it even more than anything. I said, Solomon? You said, no, Solo Man. I said, see, you do know how to crack jokes, so this is good. So I really love your business side of medicine, in addition to obviously being a fabulous rheumatologist and doctor. You are one of the founding physicians of Arizona Arthritis and Rheumatology, correct?
Well, actually, let me clarify. Arizona Arthritis Rheumatology Associates was started 30 years ago. And 30 years ago, it was started by a vision of a Dr. Cauldron, who is since retired. It was him and another doctor, Dr. Bennett. And the two of them had previously worked together in a private practice under another clinician, and were tired of feeling like they had no control, sort of endlessly being told you'll always be an employed physician, and really had an entrepreneurial spirit and wanted to just sort of start something fresh that was a safe place for rheumatologists who wanted to thrive, who had an interest in not just practicing rheumatology, but also forging the way for independent rheumatologists.
You went into rheumatology the same year my husband did, but you actually then pivoted to Arizona Arthritis. You were part of another group prior. So why did you make that shift?
Right. Actually, very similar reasons. Funny story is I did interview with Arizona Arthritis prior to choosing. I'd also interviewed with quite a few Florida groups, because having been raised in New York City and getting tired of the cold, I was ready to go somewhere warm. And those were the two states that I was picking. My wife really loved Arizona. She had gone to school here. And I love Florida, and I guess she won. And so as a result, I started interviewing. I love the concept of Arizona Arthritis, but they were still in their infancy stage. They'd been in business for about 2 or 3 years. They were sort of getting their their legs underneath them. And I joined a different group that was smaller, but had a vision. I said, okay, I really want to be part of that vision. And I was there for 10 years and we grew it, and we continued to compete, if you will, with Arizona Arthritis. But at some point, the vision started to change. We weren't aligned any longer, and as most things happen, you have to make a decision when you're at a fork in the road. And at that point, Arizona Arthritis, or AARA as we call it, was really starting to grow more robustly and starting to have a change in their dynamics with the advent of advanced practice clinicians, amalgamating research opportunities, and it really started to mold into what I had wanted the establishment that I was working at to look like. And so at that point, when we couldn't resolve our differences, it was time to move on. I went down the road, and about 5,000 patients followed me. Then
You didn't
I
have a
joined.
non-compete? I'm curious about that because this is a hot topic. And every time I have a new contract for a doctor and speak to my employment attorney, he gives me the update as to what non-compete looks like in the United States and specifically in Florida. So what happened with that?
No, you better believe I had a non-compete, but it was a reasonable distance. Now in Arizona, this is a right to work state. Technically, it wouldn't hold up in a court of law, but we parted ways amicably. There was really no ill will in any way, shape, or form. And ultimately, I'm a refined, better man for making the move, because I wanted to spread my wings and fly. And Arizona Arthritis and Rheumatology Associates gave me the platform to be able to cultivate some of my business prowess, as well as my love for teaching, with using the platform of APPs, or advanced practice clinicians, as we like to call them, to really help educate and help the workforce shortage. But
Let's
yeah,
before we jump into that, Nehad,
yeah.
before we jump into that, I want to dig a little bit more into Arizona Arthritis because you are the largest independent rheumatology group by revenue in the United States. And you and I spoke before the podcast started. There's one group that has more rheumatologists who work for them, but you actually combine rheumatologists and mid-levels, or APPs. I feel like I insult whoever I'm speaking to, referring to one category as an APP or another as a mid-level. But you are the largest, probably by provider, for independent rheumatology. When you joined Arizona Arthritis, what number physician were you?
Yeah, so I was number 10 at that point.
Okay.
And now we've got 24. So I understand where the initial confusion comes in, as it seems like after I joined, we sort of went on steroids, if you will. And part of that was the excitement and the vision that I brought to ARA to help fuel what they had started. And oftentimes people think that I was a founder, but no, I just helped move the train along, if you will. When I joined, we were just a 4-office group within the Phoenix metro area, and that was it. We are now a multi-state presence. We dominate the entire state of Arizona. We have, I believe, 14 clinics within the state, soon to be hopefully 15 clinics within the state. And then we've moved into Dallas-Fort Worth about 3 years ago, and we have 3 clinics there across that area.
How do you grow? How do you grow? Are you acquiring other groups, or other groups blending into yours? Are you hiring new grads? What do you attribute your growth to?
So it's a little bit of all of those things, and a little bit of sort of a tincture of love and a tincture of luck. And so ultimately, what happens, or what had happened, was for a long time, Arizona Arthritis had about 6 physicians, and there wasn't a whole lot of movement. They were having a hard time recruiting, and I think part of that was the just the lack of being able to get people to come to Arizona. And then in 2013, I believe, 3 rheumatologists fresh to the state one was a fresh grad, and two were just who had happened to move into Arizona, were hired all at once. And then in 2015, I came on board, and next thing you know, that made 10 rheumatologists. And the next thing you know, we all started growing rather rapidly, requiring advanced practice clinicians. Now, in addition, because of the various work that I've done both regionally and nationally, working as a consultant, helping in the Phoenix Rheumatology Association and other national platforms, I had a large network of colleagues. And when they saw where I went, they were like, well, can we come too? And so there were folks from other parts of the state that wanted to join, whether that be in the next city over Tucson or up north. Some of the folks that I had trained as residents and inspired to go into rheumatology had reached out and said, "Hey, are you guys hiring?" So a couple of years later, we had an opportunity, for example, in another city, Flagstaff, where there was a retiring rheumatologist who just called us and said, "Hey, do you guys want my patient panel? I don't know what to do with these patients." And a week prior, one of my former residents had called me, said, "Hey, I'm graduating in 6 months. Can I join your group? I want to be in Flagstaff." So some of that is sort of context, some of it is sort of timing and luck, but there was a lot of organic growth. Additionally, we had folks who were tired of the hospital system locally who jumped ship and came on board. We also had new grads. Recently, our most recent hire was a new grad out of the University of Arizona. And now we almost have a pipeline because we started the first joint venture of a community-based rheumatology fellowship in conjunction with an ACGME accredited institution here in Phoenix. So we get two fellows a year now rotating through. And so I think we're set pretty much for life between the University of Arizona down in Tucson with their fellowship, Mayo Clinic in Phoenix, as well as our new fellowship that just started in 2025 with Honor Health. And so when you say, how do we grow? That's one way. Now, as far as crossing state lines, again, a little stroke of luck for us, in as much as we started realizing that our boundaries have seemed to have been limited. There's not a whole lot of more growth that we can do in the Phoenix or Arizona area. And we started thinking, well, maybe we should go to New Mexico, or maybe we should plant a flag in Las Vegas. There's a dearth of rheumatologists in these areas, and we have people reaching out to us who want to practice there and want to use our platform to do so. Well, as we were contemplating that, we get a call from folks from Dallas-Fort Worth who were previously part of a multi-specialty group that was acquired by Optum. And then Optum basically made a tough decision to cut all of their specialty part of their platform and just focus on primary care. Well, one of these folks calls us and says, "Hey, we're in dire straits. We've got 90 days to figure out what to do. We've got a panel. There are 5 rheumatologists. We have a panel of about 2,000 patients each, and we need a place to practice." And so we quickly used our executive team to go out there, find locations that they could practice in, negotiate with Optum to help transition care safely for patients, and now we're in Dallas-Fort Worth, and certainly they came on without advanced practice clinicians, and within the course of the 3 years, we got them APPs, and ultimately they are a mirror image of what we look like in Arizona. And now we are poised to start looking at growing nationally. So our focus and sites are starting an MSO, a unique one at that, with the vision of maintaining independent rheumatology, being the sort of the champions to help give everyone the recipe for success to break through those headwinds that we're currently experiencing.
So I have 2 questions based on that amazing story, because I didn't have to ask any questions and you just followed through with what I would have asked. So that's super. How do you gain the capital to be able to grow and acquire additional locations or pay these rheumatologists or APPs or the staff while somebody revs up?
Yeah, I mean that's the pain point for us. So we're all self-funded. Everything is coming from the economy of scale, if you will. So with our successes in research, our successes with buy and bill, and being able to leverage more revenue. So our sort of in-house economics allowed us to be lucrative. And as a result, we reinvested in the business for the purpose of growth, which means for a couple of years, we had to take sort of a stagnation, if you will, on pay, sometimes a pay cut, as partners with the vision of growth. There were a couple of instances where we were just handed over practices. And so if you've got the right recipe, within a matter of 6 months, you can quickly convert that into new revenue. And so as that revenue comes in, you break even, and then 6 months after that, you have new revenue that you can reinvest. And so it becomes sort of like this flywheel where there's a constant flow of revenue, there's expenses, there's growth. And as long as you're making conscious effort to reinvest in the business, hopefully you don't run out of that revenue. But I think now we are at a critical stage where we recognize that there are a lot of independent rheumatologists that are sort of borderline failed businesses and need rescue capital, sometimes to the tune of $2 or $3 million just to stay solvent. And that's a bigger lift for us. It's a harder endeavor. And so ultimately, depending on those particular situations, we may have to take out loans. We may have to find some sort of a partner to help drive that revenue demand.
And how many capital partners, physicians, right, are invested within Arizona Arthritis?
14.
Okay. What is the track to become an investor?
So to become a shareholding partner means to become an investor in the business. And so ultimately, if you're starting from scratch, we have a 5-year track to shareholding partnership. And within that first 5 years, once you hit a certain threshold of revenue to be able to support overhead, then we matriculate you into sort of an associate partner where you're treated more like a partner with respect to both overhead and shared revenues. And then once the time frame, the courting time frame of getting to know us and we getting to know you happens, then it triggers the shareholding vote, and then you're invited to come in. Of course, there's a buy-in, like everything else, based on the valuation of the practice. And then after that, you become an equal seat and an equal say at the table. But one of the unique things that we do is during that courtship, we invite our employed physicians to the boardroom to hear everything. I mean, we've got a solid level of transparency. And the idea behind this is for them to grow, to understand what are the types of decisions that have to be made at the level of the boardroom. What does it mean to be a partner? And of course, we do also have some partner-only meetings when there are some sensitive financial topics and things that have to happen behind the scenes. But ultimately, once a consensus is reached, we loop everybody in. Everybody gets to sit in the boardroom, hear what's happening, so they really know what they're getting into. It's not sort of this veil where nobody knows what they're signing up for. And the vision that Dr. Cauldron, who initially founded the practice, had was we want everyone to be moving towards partnership. We don't want to have employed physicians if we can help it. We don't want necessarily part-time physicians. We want people invested fully, both on the clinical side and on the business side, to, like I said, forge the way forward, be masters of our own destiny. We believe everybody has a talent, and we want to cultivate that talent. So we have tons and tons of subcommittees, similar to the structure of the ACR. So you could be independent of being on the board. We also have finance committee, an operations committee, a new revenue stream committee, a committee on infusions, a committee for MID. And so all of these committees, you have an opportunity, whether you're employed, whether you're a partner, to be on and share insights and help with forging the way forward.
Do you find that some of your newer hires or some of the physicians who are starting their career, they have young families, they're struggling to find the time to be a part of a committee?
Well, thanks to the pandemic and the advent of platforms like what we're using now, the virtual space has really allowed more facility to be able to meet on a dime or meet more regularly. Prior to this, I remember the archaic days pre 2019 when we had, I guess it was Skype or some other medium, and we had to all meet in the boardroom. And some of our folks that were outside of the valley would sign in, and it would take them an extra 10 minutes to figure out how to do it because we weren't used to these platforms. And it was difficult. It was hard to have in-person meetings on a regular basis and make sure everybody was there. But now it's really not hard because we give enough notice. People can do it from the comfort of their own home. You know, if you have to be off screen, so be it. But we do ask people to be engaged, and we also ask what are the convenient times. And so the committee, the beauty of the committees is that they're usually only about 3 or 4 rheumatologists. So it's not trying to get 15, 20 people on the same page at all times.
So my follow-up question, when I had said I had 2 follow-up questions. So you're leaving the Arizona area and you move to Texas and you have 4 physicians now in Texas. The rules are different. Laws are different. How do you juggle the differences in the laws or even the differences in insurances, right? Blue Cross Blue Shield is separated by state. We have MACs for Medicare administrative contractors for regional territories. How does that work with oversight?
Yeah, that was quite the challenge, to be honest with you, and probably something that we had prepared for. So we looked at the MAC and realized, wait, Texas isn't the same MAC as Arizona, and we were trying to find states that were aligned. But again, the opportunity presented itself so quickly. What we did was to understand the corporate practice of medicine in Texas, we had to hire an attorney from Texas that could help us figure out structure, the legalities, what we can and can't do, how's the oversight look, what needs to happen. To our surprise, although we're a physician, you could not own a practice unless you're a physician in the state of Texas, and you had to be licensed. Thankfully, one of our partners was licensed, and all we needed was one. And so ultimately, we were able to quickly establish a PLLC. Beyond that, it became evident to us that since these folks didn't really have a tax ID, since they were breaking away from an existing tax ID, we had to start from scratch. And that was a painful endeavor. So really, for the first 3 months, they were seeing patients for free. We didn't want to lose that continuity of care. We didn't want to disrupt that continuity of care. We had to get the tax ID first, then get credentialed, then negotiate. And thankfully, because although, as you said, Blue Cross, for example, is state by state, we had contacts in Arizona that helped us connect with folks in Texas, and were able to quickly get on those plans. Some plans took longer than others. All in all, to start from scratch took us about 9 months to fully credential, first get on plans, get contracts, and then fully credential. So that was quite a painful process. But we did it, and here we are almost 2.5 years later, and we are solvent and hopefully soon to be profitable because of the successful platform that we have, despite all of those challenges.
How do you, I feel like you could sell anything, I'll tell you that, Nehad, because I'm thinking here going, well, if I'm a young rheumatologist and I move from one area to another and I already have 1 or 2 children and I have a spouse and maybe I have a spouse who doesn't work and stays home with the children because there's a lot of work involved in being a doctor, specifically a rheumatologist. And I'm very concerned monetarily. I don't want to bankroll this, or I don't have the money to invest in partnership. How do you handle those conversations and those decisions with continuing to keep the rheumatologist within the Arizona Arthritis platform?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, like I mentioned, at this point, as we've grown, we've become a bit more sophisticated, and effectively, we have three tracks, right? All of them, if leading to that shareholding, but it has to be a good fit both ways. And so, what we've identified is exactly what you just said. Not everybody is a perfect fit for that shareholding, sitting at the table for a whole multitude of reasons. It could be financial, it could be they're just not interested, so on and so forth. And so there is sort of the option to stay as an employed physician. There's also, at this point, the option to stay as an associate partner where you are sort of involved but not taking the financial risk, if you will, as a shareholder. You have to have the appetite for risk and understand that. Thankfully, because we have so many partners, we're not hard pressed to have an ongoing, if you will, growth of partners. In fact, a few years ago, we had to make the painful decision to say we need to kind of cap this at about 15 partners because it's really hard to make decisions in a boardroom with 15 people. Lots of different, as you know, the old adage, you ask 15 rheumatologists the same question, you'll get 15 answers. Well, it's no different in the boardroom. It's really hard to build consensus and to move forward. And so ultimately, as we have folks retiring and folks coming in and folks advancing, it seems like it's a nice sort of almost like a ballet. People coming in, people going out, and enough revenue to be able to sustain the business model and growth, but also enough option for those who maybe earlier in the career don't have the revenue, don't want to get a loan, so on and so forth. As you know, medical school now is exorbitantly expensive. People coming out with $500,000 worth of debt, they may not want to incur a large sum of debt. But I would say that we are successful enough that within 2 or 3 years of shareholding partnership, you'll probably break even on that capital investment. But also that investment shouldn't be thought of as I'm never seeing that money again, but rather investing in the business and something that when you're retiring, you're going to get back probably in a multiple of 2 to 3x over time.
My dad's a doctor, and he retired actually in the early 90s and left medicine. He was only 48 years old, so he retired young. When he went into practice, it was about 76% of physicians were independent physicians and working for themselves. Now, if we fast forward, statistics from the American Medical Association says that in 2024, only about 42% of physicians worked independently. We're dealing with a squeeze right now. We're seeing it from everywhere. How are you making it happen besides just growth and economies of scale? What ancillaries are becoming available? Where are you putting on your business hat and saying, okay, this is where we need to focus because this is how we're going to make this work?
So great question, and a sort of a commentary on the status of rheumatology in the private practice world. Margin compression is a real thing. As you know, we are a cognitive subspecialty, so we don't really have lots and lots of procedures, but we do have a variety of ancillary revenue streams. In the past, back in the 80s and 90s, laboratory in-house lab was an ancillary. Now you're lucky if you make a few bucks on that. In the past, radiographs were an ancillary. Now, you're basically paying for that. Same thing with bone density. These are conveniences that we have for patients that we take a loss on, and we hope that other revenue streams help support those losses. The infusion business for a long time was the bread and butter of rheumatologists. The buy and bill model has now been threatened year over year with margin compression. Many drugs being underwater, meaning we're buying them for more than what we get reimbursed, which is not a very healthy business model. We've tapped into the research market. We are now in 8 states. We help other rheumatology groups through our site management organization, similar to an MSO, but in research it's called an SMO. Build research. We use our platform to help negotiate contracts for them, to get them research studies, to get them ready and onboarded. So that's one way to help with some of the margin compression that we're seeing, diversification, right? The other thing, as we talked about at RPPA, is MID, or medically integrated or in-office dispensing. So if you look at our colleagues in oncology, 10 years ago, they got into the MID space. And I feel like if we want to know what the future of rheumatology looks like, you just have to look at oncologists.
Yeah, but that scares me. When you say that, it scares me, Nehad, because oncologists they're going into hospitals. They're being bought up because 65% of my revenue is medication. And if you are not looking at that and overseeing that with a microscope, you're going to file for bankruptcy immediately. And so that's what I see has happened in the oncology world. So please don't say that.
But I was gonna give the caveat, except their economics are a bit different. The medications they use are older. The medications they use oftentimes are generic. There's not a whole lot of safety margin there. We're starting to experience that with the biosimilars, et cetera. But in the MID space, there seems to be quite a big disparity between what they're doing and what we're doing. In fact, so much so that many of them are jumping ship from doing it on their own and finding a partner. Part of it is that partner helps them get better discounts, help buffer that margin a bit more, help with negotiations, et cetera. And yes, unfortunately, that, if you will, golden goose is not here to stay forever in the same capacity. If you were practicing 25 years ago when the advent of the first biologics came out and you had their Remicade clinics, I was not fortunate enough to be part of that. I just sort of came in right afterwards.
Yep.
You can recall that business economic was rather dramatic. And folks were making, I remember hearing the jokes about the Remicade millionaires, right? Folks were making money hand over fist, and that came to a screeching halt, if you will, just a couple, 3 years into it. But it didn't go away, and it was modified over time. And I think we'll see the same thing with MID over time.
Let's talk about MID. I want to stop there because the platform is not just for rheumatologists or people who know what MID is. So MID is medically integrated dispensing, and I always add on pharmacy because I want to clarify we are not dispensing marijuana. So medically integrated dispensing pharmacy. And could you describe, because you and I were really the OGs in this world, I was the first independent rheumatology group in Florida to bring on a medically integrated dispensing pharmacy, and you were definitely a powerhouse, and we work with the same partner, actually. Describe a little bit about what an MID is for the audience who's listening, and describe how it differs versus going to CVS or Walgreens or picking up a prescription at Costco.
Sure. So MID, as you put it, is really a sort of a small specialty pharmacy within the confines of your practice. That's why we call it a medically integrated dispensing vehicle, not necessarily a freestanding pharmacy like CVS. Now, I will also caveat this with every state is a bit different. There are states like the state of Texas that require it to be a fully functioning pharmacy with a licensed pharmacist on site, et cetera. So it's state dependent, but yeah, your state and my state currently are allowing for the MID, which is a bit easier. And so imagine it to be, let's say, a 10 by 10 room or a 10 by 20 room where you can fit specialized refrigeration to house the medications when they come in. You have some computers in there. You've got a pharmacy tech perhaps to help with tracking the inventory and managing what's going on. And then you've got hopefully a clinician or advanced practice clinician who can dispense the medication. You've got to follow, every state also has its corporate practice of pharmacy medicine as well. And the patients will come in, and when we're seeing them, we can use that opportunity to dispense the medication. But ideally, or if you think about it, what we're doing with this is capturing a side of business that we've oftentimes spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in employee costs to get prior authorization for medications that they would have to go either pick up at the pharmacy or get shipped to their house from specialty pharmacies. And so with the opportunity to be able to capture that line of business, but also have cold chain command of those medications and deliver that in the confine of the office with the patient, so that face to face you can have those important conversations about side effects. You can show them how to inject, etc. That's sort of the idea. But the other piece to MID is it allows you, as similar to a specialty pharmacy, to clear bag. And I know we're probably going to go in that
And
direction.
I want to jump into clear bagging, but I also want to be very clear that we are dispensing the medication that we prescribe. So
Correct.
You as a rheumatologist, if it is a self-injectable drug, we will be able to dispense the patient's Enbrel or the patient's Humira or one of the biosimilars, the 100 of biosimilars, I think, for Humira. But we're actually able to dispense that medication. But we have to go through a process, and we are not able to dispense for all of our patients. And the reason why is because of pharmacy benefit managers. Do you want to talk a little bit about why the pharmacy benefit manager, who really is they're the mafia of the insurance company in my mind, but they are also prohibiting us to be able to have direct communication and provide the medication to the patient? Can you describe how they're involved and why we aren't able to dispense for somebody who is on United Healthcare or somebody who is on a Blue Cross plan or somebody who's on Cigna and Aetna? This only is for original Medicare patients who have a Part D medication, right, a supplement, and we're able to dispense not all of them, but for some of those patients. How are PBMs involved?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it is one of the big challenges. In fact, if I rewind the clock to 2012, Arizona Arthritis tried to create their own specialty network before all of this idea, and we were only able to fill about 10% of the scripts because there were heavily tied contracts through the PBM. So private insurances or commercial insurances we weren't able to fill them because, for example, through vertical integration, if you've got United Healthcare, you've got to fill it through Optum, right? So they're all aligned, and that's the only way to go. The reason we're able to fill for Medicare D plan type patients is because of something called the Any Willing Provider Law. And so when you're dealing with a government insurance, the patient has the right to choose. If they have, let's say, United Healthcare Medicare Advantage, yes, United Healthcare will say you need to fill through Optum. However, that's not true. They don't have to fill through Optum. They can fill through whomever they wish because of that any willing provider rule. And so ultimately, the patient gets the choice. And so right now, we're filling only or predominantly folks who have Medicare and Medicare Advantage plans through the Part D supplement. And the reason we're able to do that now is really affordability. It's sort of again, stroke of luck, if you will, because of some of the reforms that happened in government with the MP3 program, the IRA program that had been rolled out a couple of, I guess, 2025, where the out-of-pocket cost to patients dramatically shrank from $7,000 or $8,000 to now no more than, for 2026, $2,100, and the ability to divide that over the course of 12 months or the number of months remaining, making it somewhat more palatable for the patient to be able to afford it.
And some drugs, I just want to let you know, it's not, there's no cap, because we had the donut hole, and then the patient had to cover 5% of the cost of the drug. I know, for example, my mother-in-law had to pay $18,000 a year for a specific medication. So it was unaffordable. So the Inflation Reduction Act, as you referred to as the IRA, is what capped the out-of-pocket cost for patients for Part D drugs. We also, though, Nehad, you and I, we had to get our clinics accredited, or rather credentialed, with the PBMs. So we had to go through the whole process. And because you were an originator, it probably took you a really long time to fight all of the denials to get in network with these PBMs so you could actually dispense the medication to patients.
Yes, that's very true. In fact, we started the process, I believe, back in 23, and it took about 9 months. Now, thankfully, with various partners out there in the market, they're able to streamline. And with the time that has elapsed and the repetition and sort of this not being new anymore, folks could get credentialed within a 3 to 4 month period of time. And instead of taking another year to become profitable, they could see profit within a quarter of green lighting.
And we can't do it with all of our medications, because we actually have to have a direct agreement and a group purchasing organization agreement with the manufacturer. So with Johnson & Johnson, with Bristol Myers Squibb, with any of these companies out there, we actually have to have a relationship. And so I know at the very beginning it was really tough. We couldn't dispense a lot because we had pharmaceutical companies looking at us, and with the parent company, the third party that you and I work with, saying, why do I need to do this? I can just have your patients fill it at Walgreens, CVS, wherever, Optum, the specialty pharmacies, and be able to directly ship to them. So you and I, we paved the way at the beginning to add on to these different medications, these manufacturers, to be able to be a part of our group purchasing organization. I want to flip into what I think will save independent rheumatology. I love your idea about economies of scale, right? Because if you are going to be a 1 or 2 physician group, yeah, I don't see that working out in the long term. You want to be able to build ancillaries. I know you're doing remote therapeutic monitoring. We're doing principal care management. There are ways that we can help our patients in a larger and on a larger scale, but specifically clear bagging. And that's what I want to get to, because I get phone calls all of the time, and phone calls where people have said, I've already talked to Dr. Solomon. I wanted your perspective. And they're like, what is clear bagging? So for those who don't know, not even what clear bagging is, but we have infusion suites, and our patients get infused with multiple drugs, whether it is Remicade or Rencia or Cimzia, they get injected, or a myriad of drugs. And we traditionally will buy and bill. So there are 3 ways that drugs can be brought into the practice. Why would you not brown bag and describe it? What's going on with white bagging? And why have we traditionally bought and billed? Because we don't white bag in our practice, and we would never brown bag. But what are these 3 aisles so people understand?
So very important to understand these terms. Effectively, I'm going to start backwards and say, why is this important that we clear bag? And the answer is cold chain custody. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
What that means is the ability to make sure that from beginning to end, you know, as a clinician, where that drug came from, what temperature it was stored at, and being able to deliver it to the patient. So, what is brown bag? Brown bag is when a patient is told by their insurance company to go to the local CVS, pick it up in a literal brown bag, you know, just like they pick up all the other pharmaceutical medications that may pick up that are pills, and then walk it over or drive it over to the clinic to drop it off, and then we would then have to manage that. Challenge with that is number one, you don't know what circumstances they brought the bag over. In other words, was it refrigerated? Did they have it in an ice box? How long? When did they pick it up? What did they do if it was over a weekend and the clinic was closed? Arizona gets to 120 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
Was it sitting in their car because they picked it up and then decided to run some errands, so on and so forth, and ultimately denature the compound? So there's a liability there. So that's why brown bagging just is a non-starter for us. That's number one. Number two, what is white bagging? So similarly, this is when a specialty pharmacy, for example, call it Optum, call it Caremark, whatever it is, will get involved in your business, meaning they tell the patient, fine, your doctor wants to use this infusion, we'll ship it to them, and then they could manage it. So that way they don't have to worry about what could theoretically happen to it from the pharmacy to their office. Again, the challenge there is twofold. One, what if I needed to make a dose adjustment? Let's call it for Remicade on the fly. In the buy bill model, we usually have a stock, and if we deem it necessary to raise the dose or decrease the dose or stop it, we can do it on the fly at that moment. When you are white bagging, it comes to you at that dose and you're restricted and have to use it at that dose. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, and this has happened to us where we were mandated to white bag, sometimes the delivery would happen at Friday at 6 p.m. The office is closed at 5. It's 120 degrees outside. We don't get to see that package until, even though it's refrigerated with the dry ice. By the time Monday rolls around, this has been sitting in 110 plus degree temperature and ultimately denatures. So white bagging was shot down a number of years ago, including by the American College of Rheumatology, a position statement against it as well. So now we go to clear bagging. What's clear bagging?
Well, I want to pivot and say the challenge with white bagging on a monetary standpoint as well. It's terrible for the patient for the reasons you stated, but it's also bad for the clinic because the only way that the clinic makes any money, because the administration code, the reimbursement is so minuscule, and we're hiring nurses, and we have physician oversight in our infusion suites, and we are hiring people to support the patient, and the front desk to schedule, right? And the billers to send it out. There's no money. So oftentimes we get a spread on the medication, right? So there is, right now it's only ASP plus 6, average selling price plus 6, but because of sequestration, it's really exactly 2%, ASP minus 2, so it's ASP plus 4. There's still not much money to be made, but there are still, as my husband loves to say, a lot of pennies make up a dollar in the world of rheumatology. And so it's a way for us to cover our costs. If they're white bagging the drug, there's no opportunity for any of those pennies. So now pivot to clear bagging. What is clear bagging?
Right. So clear bagging is the mechanism by which you can procure the drug through your in-house pharmacy, as you like to call it, right? Or medically integrated dispensing pharmacy. And this way, just like you procure it when you're ordering for buy and bill, but it's separated in its own location, it's an own fridge, and filed to a specific patient, you know exactly when the delivery is coming, for who, which patient it's going to, and you're able to, again, cold chain custody, control it from the moment it hits your clinic, actually even before, when it's going to be shipped, so that it can come to your clinic when you're open, so that you can manage the drug, so you can follow the temperature of the drug, and then you can distribute it through the IV, just like you would in a buy bill situation or a white bag situation. But the pennies, as you called them, are now for the clinic. And so ultimately, you said you see this as the path forward for the survival of independent rheumatology. And I think going back to my analogy with the oncologist, they too saw that as the road for their survival, mainly because many of their medications started to become oral or self-injectable. But with clear bagging, one thing we found out very quickly is, remember when we talked about the drugs that were underwater, some of the infusible biosimilars that were underwater on the buy bill model, for those patients who needed that specific drug, we're able to pivot, as long as they're, of course, a Medicare Part D patient, and deliver it through MID, and thankfully not be underwater anymore and make a small amount of profit as we once had through the buy and bill. But ultimately, again, this is about the patient. We didn't interrupt their care or switch them because we were forced to, because of economics or because we just couldn't keep the doors open. I mean, so it really gave us an opportunity to enhance the delivery of care and maintain the integrity of the drug. Now, for Medicare Advantage patients, traditionally for an infusion, we would do the buy bill model, and it would cost an upwards of 20% out of pocket, which for a lot of these very expensive medications was an exorbitant amount of money. Now that we have the ability through MID to clear bag, the cap is the cap. It's still that $2,100 annualized cap. And in many respects, patients who are making less than a certain amount of money, I believe it's $75,000 a year, may be eligible for grant assistance out there to help with even that $2,100 out of pocket. So now you've opened up access to a whole slew of patients. And mind you, 10,000 Medicare eligible patients every day in this country, and many who are transitioning because of the affordable cost to Medicare Advantage patients, plans rather. And so these Medicare Advantage patients, many years ago, we used to say Medicare Disadvantage, but
I still call it Medicare Disadvantage. It is still Medicare Disadvantage, Nehad.
But I think there is a small advantage in this particular scenario. So, for example, if a patient needed rituximab, there is no self-administered rituximab option out there, right? And in the old model of just buy and bill, they would have to come out of pocket with 20% of a very expensive medication, even in the face of biosimilars that are supposedly 20% cheaper, still too high for them to afford. Now you have the option through MID to deliver the rituximab at a max cap cost of $2,100 and divided over 12 months if you catch them in the beginning of the year. $175 a month becomes a heck of a lot more affordable for
the $2,100. I want to clarify is a cap if you're on original Medicare. If you're on a Medicare Part C plan, which is the Medicare Disadvantage plan, there aren't a lot of plans where the drug is within the patient's formulary and will be covered. So I actually have very few Medicare Disadvantage patients who can clear bag. I'm just pointing that out. It might be different in Arizona, but at least in South Florida, that's where I see a difference. But I do believe in the whole world of rheumatology and for patient care, clear bagging is the way to go for sure. I want to wrap up because I could talk to you forever, and I'm going to see you a ton this fall. So super excited about that. But I really want to talk about all of these changes going on in healthcare, all of the struggles. The whole goal of working healthcare is to talk about the inner workings because there are so many challenges, and I'd like to get them fixed. But we can't fix what we don't understand. So if you had a magic wand, if you could create one change within our healthcare system today, what would make it a better American healthcare system?
Two things, not just one thing, but getting rid of this incessant prior authorization for anything and everything we need to do would facilitate the delivery of more effective, rapid care for our patients. That's number one. And number two, knowing for rheumatologists that that comprises the majority of what we do to deliver the best possible care is advanced biologic therapy, getting rid of the PBM mafia, as you called them, or figuring out a way where we can play nice in the sandbox together such that they are no longer blocking the way, but actually help pave the way to rapid delivery of care.
Dr. Nehad Soloman, thank you for joining me on Working Healthcare. If this conversation hit home or made you think a little differently, don't keep it to yourself. Share the episode, tag a friend, or post about it on social media. Connect with me on LinkedIn to keep the conversation going in between episodes. If you've got a question, an episode idea, or someone you think I should feature, send me a note at meredithhirsh.com. Thank you all for the 5-star reviews. They help more listeners find the show. New episodes drop every Tuesday. Subscribe so you don't miss what's next. Tune in weekly as we explore the inner workings of healthcare, because you can't fix what you don't understand.